Kayla stood at the edge of the auction platform, her wrists bound by magnetic cuffs that hummed with a quiet cruelty. The air smelled of scorched metal and old fear, the kind that settled deep into the lungs and stayed there. She kept her gaze fixed on the floor, knowing better than to meet any eyes that lingered on her. Half-bloods were not meant to look confident. They were meant to look grateful for the chance to be sold instead of discarded. Her father's soldiers watched from the shadows, masks polished, posture rigid. They were here only to ensure the transaction was completed, not to protect her. Her existence embarrassed the warlord who had sired her. No one needed to say it aloud anymore. Every scar on her arms recited the truth plainly enough. The auctioneer's voice boomed through the chamber, slick and mocking as he announced her lot number. A hybrid youth, untrained, but physically sturdy. Limited obedience, but manageable. Any buyers for this complication? Kayla felt her stomach tighten, waiting for the usual sneers, the half-hearted bids, the possibility that today might end with her thrown into a labor pit. She didn't expect the silence that followed, nor the rustle of uniforms when someone stepped forward with deliberate, measured steps. Commander Arun Hale stopped at the base of the platform, studying her with a calm intensity she had never seen directed at her kind. His human face was weathered, carrying the weight of someone who had lost more than he spoke of. He wore the black and silver uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps, and the insignia on his chest glowed faintly with authority. Kayla didn't understand why someone like him would be here. Humans rarely participated in these auctions unless forced to. The auctioneer cleared his throat. "Human representative, are you bidding?" "I am," Arun said. His voice held no tremor, no hesitation. "Under the Interspecies Protection Accord, I am authorized to take guardianship of displaced minors. The girl qualifies." "Half-breeds aren't minors," the auctioneer countered. "Their kind matures early." Arun tilted his head slightly, unimpressed. "Look at her. She is a child." The room grew colder. Soldiers stiffened at his audacity, but none intervened. He was a diplomat, and despite the deep fractures between their peoples, his rank still carried shields of safety, thin shields, but enough. Kayla risked lifting her eyes. Arun did not look disgusted. He looked resolute. As if standing there was a choice he'd made after long consideration, not a burden forced upon him. "She is unstable stock," the auctioneer continued. "We cannot guarantee her usefulness." "I'm not buying usefulness," Arun replied. "I'm providing asylum." The word hit Kayla like a physical blow. Asylum. A concept reserved for refugees, not for someone like her, someone bred from humiliation and shame. She didn't understand it, but the sound of it made her chest ache. A low murmur swept through the chamber. The auctioneer seemed eager to be rid of her now, perhaps worried the warlord would reconsider even allowing the sale. With a forced smile, he accepted the diplomatic payment and released the magnetic cuffs. Kayla's knees almost buckled. She didn't expect freedom to feel so heavy. Arun extended a hand, not to seize her, not to drag her, but to guide her. She stared at it, unsure whether touching it would invoke punishment. When she hesitated, he lowered it without irritation. "You can walk beside me," he said. "No one will harm you." The assurance made no sense. In her world, promises were traps, kindness preludes to cruelty. But she followed him because there was nothing else to follow, not anymore. As they moved through the crimson-lit corridors, Kayla studied the man who now claimed guardianship over her. At first glance, he seemed impossibly controlled, every step measured, every motion efficient. Yet there was a softness hidden deep in the lines of his face, something tired but enduring. She wondered who had carved those lines, war, grief, or both. When they reached the exit dock, the filtered daylight hit her eyes with startling brightness. She blinked rapidly, unsettled by how open the space was. Most of her life had unfolded in cages or shadowed halls. The openness felt like another trick. A small transport shuttle awaited them, sleek and matte gray. Arun paused at the ramp and looked back at her. "You're safe now," he said quietly. Her throat tightened. She didn't believe him, not fully. Safety was a myth her kind was never granted. But the absence of immediate violence felt strange, almost disorienting. Why take me?" she asked softly, afraid the question itself might anger him. Arun didn't rush to answer. He stood there for a moment, considering the truth as if it deserved precision. "Because my people believe that no child should be left to the mercy of those who see them only as property." She didn't know what to do with that. She had no space inside herself where that kind of philosophy belonged. Arun entered the shuttle, leaving the door open for her. Kayla took one cautious step up the ramp, half expecting alarms to blare, soldiers to block her path, someone to shout that she was unworthy of rescue. But nothing happened. Inside, everything was quiet. Right? Alien in a way that felt gentler than her own culture's brutality. She sat as far from Arun as the shuttle allowed, folding into herself like a creature expecting a trap. Arun didn't move closer. He simply secured the controls and prepared for departure. As the engines warmed, Kayla glanced out through the viewport, the last sight of the place that had defined her life. She felt no nostalgia, only a dull, uncertain fear of what came next. Arun spoke without turning. "I know you don't trust me yet. That will take time. But understand this, we leave that life behind now. You are no longer an object in an auction hall." Kayla hugged her arms to her chest, trying to steady her breathing. She didn't know who she was supposed to become if not an object. The shuttle lifted off, engines roaring softly beneath them. For the first time in her life, Kayla left captivity behind. She didn't realize it yet, but she was flying toward a life she had never imagined, a life where her existence mattered, and her presence could change everything. And as the world below shrank into insignificance, an uneasy hope flickered inside her, fragile but alive, urging her to keep watching what came next. The shuttle descended onto the human frigate with a gentle shudder, its metal belly connecting to the docking cradle like a sigh of relief. Kayla gripped the edge of her seat, startled by how smoothly the vessel moved. Alien ships always jolted like violent beasts. Humans built theirs to glide. It made her uneasy. She didn't understand machines that didn't feel like threats. Arun powered down the controls and unfastened his restraints with quiet efficiency. He didn't look at her immediately, as if giving her the dignity of adjusting to the new environment on her own terms. She studied him from beneath lowered lashes. His composure was unnerving. She couldn't detect even a flicker of deception or aggression. That alone made him dangerous in a way she wasn't equipped to decipher. When the doors slid open, a wave of warm, filtered air swept into the cabin. Kayla stiffened. Human scents, sterile metals, soft disinfectants, faint traces of something sweet, rushed at her. The air tasted clean. Too clean. It felt like stepping into a dream she didn't trust. A small figure barreled into view, skidding to a halt at the base of the ramp. A human child. Kayla's breath caught. She hadn't been told there would be another human in this arrangement, much less one so young. The boy's eyes were bright, round with excitement rather than fear. He wasn't armed. He didn't bear the posture of someone taught to dominate or punish. "Dad," he called out, his voice buoyant. "You're back. Is that her?" Arun gave a subtle nod. "Leo, this is Kayla. She'll be staying with us." The boy's enthusiasm faltered when he finally noticed Kayla's posture, hunched shoulders, tightened muscles, hands curled into defensive claws. He didn't take a step closer. Instead, he lifted one hand in a small, cautious wave. She had never seen a greeting like that. It felt strangely gentle. "Hi," he said softly. Kayla didn't answer. She couldn't. Her throat felt locked, her instincts screaming that proximity to strangers, especially children, could lead to unpredictable punishment. In her world, even the young were conditioned to assert dominance. Arun guided Leo back a step with a gentle touch to his shoulder. "Give her space," he said. "She's had a long, difficult day." Leo nodded earnestly. "Okay." Kayla watched the exchange with a growing confusion. The child obeyed without protest. Arun didn't raise his voice. No one was struck for a minor misstep. It defied everything she had been taught about power. Arun gestured for her to follow as he moved down the corridor. She hesitated, then rose carefully from her seat and stepped after him, keeping enough distance to flee if necessary. The hallway stretched ahead, softly illuminated by recessed lights that cast no harsh shadows. Every surface gleamed with a polish that spoke of care rather than intimidation. "This ship will be home until we reach Earth," Arun explained without looking back at her. "You'll have your own room. Your own belongings. Privacy." The word struck her again, privacy. A concept whispered among the enslaved like a myth. A place where no eyes watched, no commands barked, no punishments lurked behind every movement. It felt impossible. She didn't speak aloud, but the question throbbed inside her. Why give me something I don't deserve? Leo hurried beside Arun, glancing back at her with curiosity, but never pushing closer than she could tolerate. She noted the easy way he moved through the ship, his steps unburdened by fear. He belonged here. This was his territory. She expected him to flaunt that power eventually. They reached a narrow door that slid open at Arun's command. Inside was a small room, compact, but astonishingly clean. A cot with crisp linens, a small desk with soft lighting, a folded blanket that looked impossibly plush. Kayla froze in the doorway, utterly overwhelmed. "This will be yours," Arun said. "If anything is uncomfortable, we can adjust it." She flinched at the offer. Adjustments were punishments in her world. Adjustments meant she had done something wrong. Arun noticed the tension in her shoulders and softened his voice. "You don't have to sleep on the floor. You don't need to stay awake all night to guard yourself. You're safe here." He kept using that word as if it carried weight with her. As if repeating it would rewrite the memories etched into her bones. Leo stepped forward again, stopping just short of her reaction threshold. "I drew something for your door," he said, pulling a small square of paper from his pocket. A simple drawing, 3 stick figures under a star-filled sky, one of them clearly meant to be her, marked by little horns he'd guessed at. His artistic skill was questionable, but his intent was unmistakable. He wasn't mocking her. He was welcoming her. Her stomach tightened with confusion. She didn't know how to receive gestures that weren't bribes or traps. Arun gently took the drawing from Leo and placed it on her desk. "You don't have to display it if you don't want to," he told her, "but we wanted you to feel included." Included. Another word that pressed painfully against her defenses. As Leo walked away, humming quietly, Kayla lowered herself onto the cot's edge. The cushions sank beneath her weight, soft and forgiving. She felt unworthy of such softness. Arun lingered by the door, watching her with that same unreadable steadiness. "Rest," he said. "We'll talk tomorrow. There is no rush. No expectations." She didn't know how to respond. She simply nodded once, stiffly. He stepped out, and the door slid closed with a gentle hiss. For the first time, Kayla was alone in a room without locks. The quiet pressed around her, unfamiliar and strangely frightening. She pulled the blanket toward her, tracing its fibers with trembling fingers. No alarms blared. No footsteps approached with menace. In that fragile silence, she felt something shift inside her, not trust, not yet, but the smallest crack in the armor she had been forced to wear her entire life. As she lay back slowly, unsure how to sleep on a bed meant for comfort rather than control, one thought hovered like a trembling star just beyond reach. If this was the beginning, the rest of the journey might be far stranger, and far kinder, than anything she'd ever imagined. Night aboard the frigate arrived quietly, announced only by the dimming of the corridor lights and the soft shift in the ship's ambient hum. Kayla had never known a night that did not come with dread. Darkness, in her world, always meant scrutiny disguised as rest. But here, the ship seemed to breathe gently, almost protectively, as if encouraging her to loosen her guard. She curled on the narrow cot, unable to decide whether the softness beneath her was comforting or threatening. Her body demanded rest, but her mind stayed sharp, replaying every moment since Arun had taken her from the auction hall. Humans showed kindness too easily. It frightened her. Nothing given freely stayed free. A faint rustle outside her door made her sit upright. She listened, breath held, muscles ready to spring. The door slid open just an inch, and a small figure peeked through. "Kayla?" Leo whispered. "Are you awake?" She blinked, wary. He stepped inside before she could answer. He carried a blanket clutched to his chest, patterned with scattered stars. His voice was soft, almost apologetic. "I didn't want you to be cold. You looked cold earlier." He held the blanket out to her like an offering. Kayla stared at it, unsure what he wanted in return. Generosity always had a price. She grasped the edge cautiously, expecting him to stop her or demand something. Instead, he smiled, bright, innocent, unafraid. "You can have it," he said simply, as though it were the most normal thing in the universe. Before she could speak, footsteps echoed in the corridor. Leo turned, startled, and Arun appeared in the doorway, concern crossing his features. He scanned the room, then his son, then Kayla's tense posture. "Leo," Arun said gently, "I told you she needs space tonight." "I know," Leo murmured, "but she didn't have a blanket." Kayla expected reprimand. Instead, Arun knelt beside his son. "Your heart is good," he said quietly, "but we have to let her feel safe in her own time." He guided Leo out with a reassuring hand before turning to her. She stiffened when his gaze met hers, bracing for anger. None came. "You don't owe him anything," Arun said. "He gave you that because he wanted to, not because he expected repayment." The idea was almost painful. Repayment was the foundation of survival. Nothing was ever just given. "Why?" she asked, barely audible. "Because you're part of this family now," he answered. The word struck again, family. She didn't know what to do with it. She looked away, clutching the star-patterned blanket as if it might anchor her in a world she didn't understand. Arun dimmed the light further. "Try to rest," he said softly. "If you need anything, just call for me. There's no punishment here." He left without another word, the door closing gently behind him. Kayla lay down again, the blanket pulled to her chest, trying to believe the safety he promised. For a few moments, the ship seemed calm enough to let her drift into a fragile, tentative sleep. But the peace shattered instantly. A shrill alarm ripped through the corridor, jolting her upright. The lights flickered red, bathing her room in pulses of warning. The ship trembled under a sudden impact, dreadfully familiar, like the quakes of orbital bombardment she'd once endured. Her breath stopped. Another tremor shook the frigate, sharper this time, making her clutch the cot. The door slid open automatically at Arun's override. "Kayla! Stay close!" Panic seized her limbs. She stumbled to her feet as Arun reached her, his uniform half-fastened, eyes sharp and alert. Leo clung to his father's side, trembling but silent. The boy's fear was honest, not a trap, not a performance. It made Kayla's chest twist painfully. "What's happening?" she managed. "Orders," Arun said. "Alien signatures, your father's faction." Ice flooded her veins. Of course. Of course the warlord would not simply release her. She had been a stain on his pride for too long to let her escape into gentler hands. "You need to come with me," Arun said. "They're here for you." Her throat tightened. "You'll give me to them." Arun turned, stunned. "No. I won't." His voice wasn't harsh, but fierce, like steel beneath velvet. The sincerity was undeniable. But sincerity had never saved anyone she knew. She expected the universe to contradict him at any moment. A violent crash echoed from deeper in the ship. Leo let out a broken whimper, and Kayla reacted instinctively, stepping between him and the sound. The movement surprised her as much as them. She was supposed to preserve herself first. Yet her body had moved before her mind could catch up. Arun placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "We're going to the secure room," he said. "Stay with me. No matter what happens." They ran through the corridor as heavy footsteps and metallic clangs reverberated through the ship's spine. The attackers were inside. Kayla could sense them, trained soldiers, relentless, moving with precision. Her father would not have sent weaklings. A shockwave rattled the lights overhead. Kayla stumbled, Arun grabbed her arm. She caught the briefest glimpse of fear in his eyes, not of dying, but of losing the people beside him. As they reached the reinforced door, a shadow surged from the far end of the hall, an armored alien, weapon raised. Instinct took hold of Kayla before thought could intervene. She thrust out her hand, a raw cry tearing from her throat. A pulse of invisible force erupted from her palm, slamming the attacker into the wall with bone-cracking violence. The corridor fell silent. Kayla stared at her own hand, trembling. She had never used her inherited power freely, not without fatal consequences. Yet here she was, alive, unpunished, breath still filling her lungs. Arun's eyes widened, not in fear, but awe. "You protected us," he said, voice hushed. She didn't know what to say. She didn't know how to understand what she'd done. Before anyone could move, more footsteps approached. Arun ushered them into the secure chamber and slammed the door just as another blast rocked the ship. Inside the sealed darkness, Kayla clutched the blanket she had carried with her and tried to steady her racing heart. She wasn't sure if she was more afraid of the invaders outside, or of the realization that, for the first time, she had fought not for survival, but for someone else. And that terrifying truth was only the beginning of what awaited her. The days following the attack unfolded with an uneasy quiet, as though the ship itself was holding its breath. Reinforcement crews patched scorched metal and recalibrated ruptured circuits while security teams doubled their patrols. Kayla felt the tension lurking beneath every polite gesture, every soft-spoken assurance. Nothing aboard the frigate had returned to normal. It had merely settled into a careful, fragile calm. Arun walked the corridors with a new sharpness in his gaze, his posture taut in ways Kayla hadn't noticed before. He spoke gently to her, but there was a fire behind his eyes now, a fire born from the knowledge that enemies had breached what he considered home. Leo stayed close to him, often seeking comfort in the form of a hand on his father's sleeve or a whispered question. The boy had been brave during the attack, but the fear lingered. For Kayla, the aftermath felt surreal. She had expected punishment for using her abilities, even if she'd done so to protect them. She had expected suspicion, fear, or distance. Instead, she found Arun watching her with thoughtful respect, and Leo hovering near her with quiet admiration. They treated her not as a weapon but as someone who had shown courage. She didn't understand it, but she couldn't bring herself to reject it either. In the days that followed, Arun established a routine for all three of them, perhaps to anchor them after the chaos. Mornings were dedicated to lessons, human language refinement, cultural basics, simple mathematics. Kayla absorbed everything with swift precision, though she rarely commented or asked questions. Arun praised her progress anyway, which always left her unsettled. Afternoons involved ship chores, helping in the mess hall, organizing supply crates, learning how to navigate basic consoles. These tasks gave Kayla something to focus on, something that kept the spiraling uncertainty at bay. Leo often appeared beside her with a grin, offering to help even when his assistance slowed things down. His persistence wore down her rigid defenses one small smile at a time. At night, Kayla returned to her room, hers, truly hers, where she grappled with the unfamiliar sensation of safety. She slept in spurts, waking at minor sounds, but gradually the fear began to dull. The star-patterned blanket Leo had given her remained wrapped around her shoulders every night, grounding her more than she wanted to admit. One evening, Arun invited her to the observation deck. She hesitated in the doorway, uncertain if she belonged there, but he simply motioned her closer. The chamber was dim and wide, its curved windows revealing a canopy of stars scattered across the void like luminous dust. Leo lay sprawled on the floor, tracing constellations with a stylus on his datapad. He glanced up and waved her over. Kayla approached slowly, careful not to disturb the quiet serenity of the room. Arun tapped a section of the glass. "That's the Terran passage," he said. "We'll cross it soon. After that, we're only days from Earth." Kayla nodded, though the idea of Earth, a planet filled with humans, filled with expectations she couldn't meet, terrified her. She folded her arms around herself, absorbing the vastness outside the window. Leo scooted closer and pointed at a cluster of stars. "That one looks like you," he said, his voice bright. "Strong and sharp." Kayla blinked at him, unsure what to do with the compliment. No one had ever associated her with anything other than defect or burden. Arun sat down beside her, though he kept a respectful distance. "We'll begin the adoption process once we land," he said. If that's something you want. Her breath caught. Adoption. The word felt too heavy to hold, too strange to believe in. She looked at him, expecting to see doubt in his expression. Instead, she found only sincerity. Why would you want me? She whispered. Because family isn't built from perfection, Arun said. It's built from commitment. From choosing each other. Leo chimed in immediately. And I already chose you. The simplicity of the boy's statement hit her harder than any blow she'd ever endured. She turned away, blinking rapidly, overwhelmed by the unfamiliar ache in her chest. But safety, she reminded herself, was never permanent. And she had proof now. Later that night, while returning from the mess hall, Kayla overheard a hushed argument outside the command office. Voices tightened with authority, tinged with fear. She recognized Arun's voice first, controlled yet strained. Opposite him, a diplomat spoke with clinical detachment. She is a political asset, the man insisted. If the warlord wants her returned, we cannot ignore the diplomatic leverage. She is a child, Arun shot back. And she risked her life to defend mine. That does not change her value as a bargaining chip. Kayla's hands clenched. A cold wave rolled through her body. She backed away before Arun could sense her presence, her breath shaking. Asset. Bargaining chip. Political leverage. The words wrapped around her like chains she thought she had escaped. Of course it was temporary. Of course safety had conditions. That night, Kayla didn't sleep. When dawn's pale glow seeped through her door, she made her decision. She could not allow Arun and Leo to be dragged into conflict because of her existence. She would leave before anyone could use her as a weapon against them. She packed nothing. She owned almost nothing anyway. She slipped quietly through the corridors, avoiding cameras with instincts born from years of survival. She reached the auxiliary bay where escape pods were stored. Most were sealed, but a maintenance hatch left one lightly guarded. She placed her hand on the activation panel, but before she could engage it, a soft voice echoed behind her. They don't go. She froze. Leo stood at the end of the corridor, hair mussed, eyes wide with hurt. Arun appeared moments later, breathless, panic etched in every line of his face. Kayla, Arun said, stepping forward slowly, as if she were a wounded creature ready to bolt. You don't have to run. We won't give you up. They want to use me, she whispered, trembling. They will take me from you. They can try, Arun replied. But you are not a piece on their board. You choose where you belong. And we choose you. Leo nodded desperately. Please stay. Kayla's resolve cracked. The fear remained, but it no longer stood alone. Something warmer, something frighteningly hopeful, rose to meet it. She stepped away from the pod, hesitant but willing, and let Arun guide her back toward the heart of the ship. As she walked between them, flanked on one side by trust and the other by innocence, she realized the choice she dreaded had already been made. She had chosen them too. And soon, the universe would force her to defend that choice. The cabin settled into a strange quiet after the storm of confessions and confrontations, as if the walls themselves were trying to decide what to make of the two strangers forced into each other's orbit. Aaron moved slowly at the kitchen counter, rolling his shoulders as though shaking off whatever invisible weight he had carried for years. Saris watched him from the edge of the living area, her hands clasped together so tightly her knuckles had begun to pale beneath their pale violet skin. She didn't feel safe, exactly, but she no longer felt like prey. That tiny shift unsettled her more than she wanted to admit. Aaron poured water into a battered metal cup and set it in front of her without a word. She stared at the steam curling upward, almost hypnotized by it. Humans really drink this when they're anxious? She asked, attempting humor though her voice trembled. You get used to it, Aaron replied, leaning against the counter. His eyes softened again, not pity, but something gentler, more curious. You don't have to force yourself to pretend everything's normal. Not after what you told me. Saris lowered her gaze. The truth she had shared earlier still stung like an open wound. Being called a mistake her whole life hadn't hardened her, it had hollowed her. Now that someone had finally looked at her and not seen a burden, she felt unsteady, as if her own emotions were a new and dangerous terrain. I didn't tell you because I wanted sympathy, she whispered. I told you because I knew you'd ask eventually. You look at people like they matter. And you don't think you do? Erin asked quietly. She didn't answer. Couldn't. Instead she rose from her seat and walked toward the small window, watching icy wind whip across the mountains outside. The storm clouds were splitting apart, moonlight spilling through in slicing silver beams. Saris pressed her fingertips to the cold glass. You said you'd help me, she said. What does that even mean? My kind doesn't just let someone walk away. And yours, your world doesn't want more outsiders. Mine doesn't want the wrong people deciding who lives and who doesn't, Erin said. But you're not the problem, Saris. You were never the problem. She turned, her dark pupils dilating in confusion. Compliments unsettled her more than threats ever had. She didn't know how to stand still beneath them. Before she could respond, the cabin lights flickered. Twice. Then a low hum vibrated through the floorboards like distant machinery powering up. Erin reacted immediately, grabbing the scanner from the table. That's not normal, he muttered. Power grid stable. Something external's interfering. Sarah's breath hitched. They found me? Erin didn't say yes, but the tightness around his jaw told her enough. She backed away until her spine touched the wall. The fear she had swallowed for hours surged back, twisting her stomach. I can leave, she said, voice cracking. I'll run now. I'll go into the mountains before they get here. You won't be involved. You won't be punished. Erin shook his head immediately. I didn't take you in to hand you back the first time someone knocks on the door. You don't understand, she insisted. It won't just be a knock. They'll take you too. You helped me. That's enough to... A sharp tone blared from the scanner. Erin's eyes narrowed at the reading. Not your people. Saris froze. Then who? Erin moved toward the front door, motioning for her to stay behind him. Human patrol drone. Military class. They're scanning the sector. But why? Saris whispered. This area is supposed to be empty. You told me no one comes out here. They don't. Erin's voice dropped. Unless someone tipped them off. Saris felt something cold grip her spine. A name surfaced in her mind, one she hoped never to think about again. My half-brother, she said. He wouldn't dare follow me himself. But he'd tell others where you live if it meant avoiding trouble. Erin muttered a curse under his breath. If they're scanning for unauthorized life signatures, they'll detect you in seconds unless we mask your readings. Emotion churned inside her, fear, shame, frustration, all tangled. I told you I should have run. And I told you you're not running anywhere alone, Erin said firmly. He strode to a storage crate, pulling out a metallic mesh blanket and a small device that resembled a broad, flat ring. Curl up on the floor, he instructed. This should scatter your biosignal long enough for the drone to pass. Saris hesitated, not because she doubted him, but because kneeling there, hiding like a hunted animal, felt like stepping back into a life she desperately wanted to escape. Still, she obeyed. Erin draped the mesh over her carefully, as though handling something fragile. She could hear his heartbeat, loud, steady, human, when he knelt beside her to activate the device. You're going to be fine, he murmured. I promise. She swallowed. You can't promise things like that. I can for you. The sincerity in his voice shattered something inside her. Beneath the mesh, she blinked hard, resisting the sting behind her eyes. Moments later, an intense white beam flooded the windows as the drone swept past. The cabin trembled faintly. Erin moved to the front door, peering through a narrow gap as the humming grew louder, then fainter, then silent. After nearly a full minute of waiting, he finally exhaled. They're gone. Saris pushed the mesh off slowly and sat up. Her pulse still raced, but she forced herself to steady her breathing. When she stood, Erin was already watching her, studying her, as though trying to read every emotion flitting across her face. You didn't have to do that, she said. You barely know me. You're right, Erin replied, stepping closer. But I know what it's like to be hunted. And I know what it's like to lose everything because no one stepped in. His voice softened. I'm not making that mistake again. Saris felt an unfamiliar warmth growing inside her chest, something equal parts terrifying and comforting. Not safety, not yet. But possibility. I don't know what happens next, she admitted. Or how long we have before someone else tries to take me. Aaron reached past her, switching off the emergency device. Then we figure it out together. 1 hour at a time. His words lingered in the air between them. Simple, honest, anchoring. For the first time since she had been sold, Saris felt the future shift. Still dangerous. Still uncertain. But no longer inevitable. And for the first time in her life, she did not feel alone.